Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hello! My name is Learn the Conjurer, and I am your host of all things spooky, creepy, weird, and fun. In today's video, I'm discussing something that I think is very much a popular debate between believers and skeptics alike. The topic of today's video: ghost hunting. What is ghost hunting? Ghost hunting, to put it simply, is the process of investigating allegedly haunted locations and trying to find ghosts. Typically, a ghost hunting team tries to collect any form of spectral evidence. But how do you hunt a ghost? Well, I'll tell you. In ghost hunting, you're basically going to be needing a bunch of different supplies, as well as comfortable clothing, because oftentimes you're there all night. And yes, ghost hunting typically happens at night. I mean, if you do it during the day, it's not as creepy, right? You need the pizzazz! Most ghost hunters do their research on the history of the location before they even attempt to go anywhere near this place. And of course, they're going to need proper permission before they investigate anywhere, because property laws. And of course, what is ghost hunting without the use of tools? How many ghost hunting tools are out there, you ask? Well, I'll tell ya! There's actually several different types of tools that a person can use in their attempt to ghost hunt. I've searched a bunch of different websites to see what are the main tools that are often used in ghost hunting. I personally have picked 10. Yeah, 10. Some of these items that people use to ghost hunt are actually tools that you might have lying around your house. Others are a little more unorthodox and very pricey. So in this video, I'm going to go through all of the different ghost hunting tools and equipment while talking about if they actually work. Before we even get started, I do want to just go ahead and claim right off the bat, I am a believer of the supernatural. I mean, like, you're on my channel and I feel like context clue says that, right? Right? I will personally leave my ghost hunting opinions to the end of the video. Now, I'm going to go and I'm going to approach all of these tools from the believer standpoint as well as the skeptic's standpoint, just to make this as fair as humanly possible. Now let's get to some of these tools. The first tool in ghost hunting is probably the most obvious tool, and that is a camera. Cameras range from all sorts of types, from DSLRs to home surveillance cameras to thermographic cameras, even the camera on your mobile device. Cameras are very popular in the use of ghost hunting because you can find all sorts of alleged evidence while using them. Common photographic evidence that's found on cameras will be things like ghost orbs or spectral mists. Now, with the use of thermographic cameras, a lot of ghost hunters prefer to use these because they can claim that they can find full spectral figures on these cameras, because most of the time these are used to find cold spots. Many believers out there have pictured full-on apparitions. Typically, if you go on a ghost tour, a lot of the ghost guides will tell you to take as many pictures as possible in hopes that you find some type of ghostly evidence. Here's why cameras might not always work in ghost hunting. Skeptics claim that there is no scientific link between cold spots and spectral activity. Skeptics also claim that any spectral mists can easily be mistaken for a trick of the light or perhaps a camera malfunction. Orbs can simply be dismissed as specks of dust or even bugs flying into a camera lens. Now onto another tool, one that's not typically used in ghost hunting and is also argued to be not a very safe choice. Use of spirit boards, or sometimes called Ouija boards. Spirit boards are often used to directly communicate with the dead, or just the spirit realm in general. Essentially, the spirit board is allowing a living user to use a series of letters, yes and no questions, as well as a planchet to point to messages that a spirit is going to allegedly try to tell you through the board. Believers do warn that the use of a spirit board can invite malevolent creatures and often sometimes demons into your space, because oftentimes spirit boards are used as a conduit of a portal of sorts to allow anything to pass through to the living realm. Now, again, I will say this once, I will say this again, I will say this until I am blue in the face. Use of spirit and Ouija boards is something that I do not condone. In the end, I'm not going to judge anybody for what they choose to do, but why are you going to do that? Can you do anything else? Just like, have you seen a horror movie? Any horror movie? Any of them? Does it end well? No, I think not. Just don't use them. Just don't use them. everything is going wrong in your life after using a spirit board? I wonder why. Just don't condone them. Whether you believe in them or not, my personal opinion is that I just don't think that they should be used. Now here's what skeptics believe in the spirit board usage. They easily think that any person or persons that are operating the spirit board can subconsciously be moving the planchette without actually knowing that they're doing it. Believers think that a skeptic using a spirit board won't get the same results as a believer because they aren't open to the supernatural, and so spirits are not going to want to come and show up. I just don't think you should use one of those. Just don't use anything else. Just don't do it. Don't do it. Next tool is what's commonly known as a EMF reader or electromagnetic field reader. To put it simply, this tool is used to measure the amount of electromagnetic fields that are in the air. According to believers, spectral activity is often manifest through taking all sorts of energy out from the air, also known as creating electromagnetic fields. Of course, the higher the EMF reader reads, supposedly that means that a spirit is close by. Why it may not work? Well, EMF readers can easily be sparked up by all sorts of things. From faulty wiring, to high amounts of energy usage, to even something like being too close to a radio tower or a fuse box. This is one that skeptics definitely try to sink their teeth into and prove that it is not a useful tool in testing for the supernatural. Next is something that I'm sure everyone has been seeing for the last several months: temperature guns. A handheld gauging device that you push the trigger on, and whatever surface that you're pointing it on, it's going to tell you the temperature of it. Of course, believers are going to think that cold spots are a physical manifestation of spectral activity. So of course, this tool is often used to measure if there's a cold spot nearby. If something that was once warm 1 minute ago is now cold, they believe that that is the evidence of a spirit being formed. Typically, temperature guns are also coupled with thermographic cameras. Why it might not work? Well, like thermographic cameras, there is no actual scientific link in proving that there is cold spots and spiritual activity that connect together. Besides that, temperature can easily be manipulated on a surface. And of course, temperature can change on a surface like that depending upon what the surface is made out of. For example, if you were to point your temperature gun at a metal roof on a house, even at night, chances are it's holding still a lot of heat. Conversely, if you were to go ahead and point that gun to maybe the top story of the same house, it's going to be much colder. The next tool, which is a little more unorthodox and you don't see it all the time, is the use of psychics or mediums. The use of a medium is basically to help the investigators have someone who can physically and oftentimes feel the presence of a spirit or the supernatural. But simply, mediums have the psychic gift in order to communicate with those that are no longer with us. So they're often coupled. As investigators use their tools, the medium will sit there and try to communicate and coax out a spirit so that then the investigators can use their tools to record whatever they find. Why it might not work? Skeptics often sit there and claim that psychics and mediums are basically con artists. Unfortunately, the mass amount of availability of information, pictures, all sorts of things that are out there on the internet these days make it so that anyone who claims that they might be a medium or a psychic can easily go and do ample amounts of research before even walking into a space. Personally, I am a believer of psychics and mediums and any kind of psychic gift. I believe that there are people out there that are gifted with this. But conversely, there are a lot of people out there that try to take money from people and claim that they have this gift and are exceptional con artists. What we'll be talking about is the EVP recording device. EVP stands for Electronic Voice Phenomenon. This device is meant to record the disembodied voices of the dead. This is another communicative device that's used for the spirit realm so that any spirits who wish to communicate with the living can basically be amplified by using this device. The spiritual realm cannot be heard by regular hearing. Why it may not work. Auditory hallucinations, in which people hear things that are not actually there. Another thing that we often find, especially when it comes down to true crime cases, is that when people are listening to recorded conversations with people that are often faint or they can't quite make out what they're saying, they have to use their best guess in figuring out what is being said, if anything is being said at all. So this is the same exact thing when someone is sitting there with headphones trying to amplify their EVP meter. This tool is actually something that I bet a lot of people don't ever think about when it comes down to ghost hunting, and that is simple motion sensors. So like most people who use them for their interior and the exterior of their home to turn on porch lights or other things like that, motion sensors are often triggered by motion. Believers will argue that when a motion sensor is triggered, when nothing is in fact there, it is proof that there is spectral activity going on. Skeptics will argue that motion sensors, some of them, tend to be more sensitive than others. Or sometimes they could easily malfunction. A bug flies in front of it, boom, it turns on. Even a flake of dust can sometimes make a motion sensor turn on. So this next tool is one that I've actually recently used in a ghost hunting tour. It's called a binary response device. This is basically a lot simpler and arguably a lot safer than using a spirit board. But the jury's still out on whether it's actually safer than a spirit board or not. Essentially, to use this tool, you ask yes or no questions to an area that is supposedly haunted. If there is a spirit there that is willing to communicate with you, one side of the device will ring yes, the other side will ring no. Oftentimes, these devices are also like an EMF reader where they're color-coded instead. So if you were to ask a question that was a yes question, the light would be green. If you asked a no question, the light would be red. Now, why it might not work is actually the same reason that skeptics believe that EMF readers cannot always be considered correct in ghost hunting. And that is because electromagnetic fields, which is also what this binary device is using, can often be manipulated or be caused by something that isn't spectral at all. The next tool is what is most commonly referred to as a ghost box. This, I think, is one of the most popular tools that we have found in ghost hunting. We see it all the time on TV, and we also see it on some professional paranormal investigative sites. The ghost box is considered to be the most advanced use of EVP usage. Use it, you basically search through the channels in order to find disembodied voices that are trying to communicate with you. Now, most of the time, you're going to hear static, but if you do it properly, you should be able to hear something trying to come through and trying to communicate with you. It's a very interesting tool, and I have seen it used a lot, and most times I think that it is probably one of the best tools to use when you are trying to communicate with the dead. Here's why it might not work. A ghost box is, again, essentially a hand radio. And what it's really doing is most of the time it just goes through the AM channels. AM radio is primarily unused by most radio stations. However, it isn't entirely abandoned. Radio waves can easily travel in between other stations, which means that they can easily go onto a channel that isn't being used. In other words, you might get interference that's actually coming from a real radio station with a real talking person, and it could be easily mistaken for ghostly activity. The last tool that I'm going to go over is one that is very simple and one that maybe not everyone has heard of before, called dowsing rods. Dowsing rods have actually been used for millennia. Back in the day, people would use them to find things such as water channels, for example. Today, these dowsing rods are usually made of brass, and typically they're L-shaped. Use of them is to detect energies that are emitted from common objects, even the air around us. Like most ways that investigators like to communicate with the spectral realm, they will go while holding these rods and ask yes and no questions. If the rods cross, or if they go away from each other, that means that a spirit is communicating with them. Now, why these dowsing rods might not work is simply due to human error. Skeptics would argue that by holding these rods, very easily a person could subconsciously move them by not remaining perfectly still. Now, I have personally used dowsing rods in ghost hunts before. And I will agree, I didn't necessarily feel like they were as strong as a tool to use because I have never practiced using a dowsing rod. Now, if you have dowsing rods, you can very easily practice by simply just holding them as still as possible. But to people that have never used them before, and you're walking around, and you're asking questions, it's hard to focus and make sure that you're not actually moving them yourselves. Now that we've gone through all of the major tools that I have personally found, let's talk about ghost hunting evidence. Many skeptics would argue that any of this evidence could have been easily tampered with, offer a perfectly logical explanation, or simply prove that a camera or tool has malfunctioned. It's amazing that we're living in the age of technology where we can basically do anything, and yet we have a difficult time still proving if the spectral realm is real. What is my personal opinion, you might ask? Well, it's no secret. I have had plenty of ghostly experiences to prove my beliefs. That being said, I don't really need ghost hunting to prove my belief. I guess it would be different if I lived in a place that was haunted and I really, really, really wanted to know if this thing wanted to communicate with me. As someone who has worked in haunted places as well, I didn't need to prove that the place was haunted because of the things that I would see and experience. So, in other words, ghost hunting might be really fun for some people, and it might even prove some skeptics wrong, but personally, I never needed it to prove my beliefs. When you really think about it, if you were potentially dealing with a malevolent spirit, would you really want to use tools to communicate with it? I mean, there are some places that have had some really terrifying evidence and a lot of crazy experiences that people have had. Sometimes I think it's just best to leave these things alone. And I mean, I guess to think about it in a lighter note, how would you feel if you were just living your best life in the ghostly realm and all of a sudden a team of people just barge into your place and start screaming, "Say something! Anything! Communicate with us!" Personally, I would be a little jarred. Like, no, Jeff, I'm not going to sit here and move a book off of a shelf to prove to you that I exist. Like, who do you think you are, Jeff? Get out of here. So, like, my personal opinion, let's just leave the ghosts alone. Let's let them choose their own way to communicate with us. What you think, Ghosts and Ghoulies? Do you think that ghost hunting really works? Have you done ghost hunting before? Has anything happened when you went? I want you to share your story in the comments down below. Share with me your personal opinions and tell me if you've used any of these tools and if you've gotten anything that has proven to you that you have evidence of spectral activity. Whether you're a believer or a skeptic, I hope that this video educated you on what actually goes bump in the night. If you enjoyed my video, please remember to like as well as leave a comment down below. And of course, please consider subscribing if you would love more spooky content from me. That's it for me, but remember the rules of conjuring, everyone. Never play alone, never play in a graveyard, and always say goodbye. Goodbye, Ghosties and Ghoulies.